Hey everyone, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Ralph De La Rosa. And many of you would know of Ralph because we've frequently talked over
Mm,
the years.
yeah.
And welcome, Ralph. Great to have you
Thank you.
back.
Always good to be here with you.
Just to remind, Ralph is a
Mm,
psychotherapist
mhm.
and really does a wonderful integrated um, practices with spirituality, psychotherapy, and we'll talk all about that, so you can hear a little
Yeah,
bit more about what you do, what Ralph does.
there's a few things going on for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Mm,
but let's just go. When Ralph was getting on the Zoom, which
mm,
is how we do these things,
mm.
before his video came up, he had his. Usually, there's a picture of somebody, but Ralph had a wonderful little. It's like a Hallmark card to us now. It's called "Bless This Mess." And I said, God, is that appropriate for what we're going through? Yeah, we're here, just before the election. Um,
Indeed.
but then we had furthered the conversation because Ralph and I haven't talked in quite some time. And, uh, and he said a lot has gone on in this last year. Well, whatever it is that's gone on, I'd like to hear about it. And, obviously sharing, which you always do, is so
Mm,
beneficial because
mm.
we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. More like each other than we are
Yeah.
different from one another, for sure, as Maya Angelou said. That is
Yeah.
certainly true. And the last time we talked, actually, we were on the precipice of the 2020 election and all of the storms that were happening in
That's the
2020.
last time we
That's the
talked?
last time. We
No.
gotta get a better cycle going here, Raghu. This is yeah,
Shit, I
yeah.
thought it was like a couple of years ago, year even. Are you sure? I'm going to go through
No,
my records.
you might be right, actually. I might be spacing
I'm
out, but
always
we did
right.
one in 2020. We did one in
Yes,
2020.
we
Yeah.
did. Yeah. But
Yeah.
no, we did one recently in the last couple of years. Anyhow, yeah. But
Yeah.
there's been a time span that catch me up.
Oh, I mean, so I'll just preface it by saying I was recently diagnosed with ADHD,
Mm.
which I know is very much a trend right now. And so I'm just kind of a trendy guy, but um, it really does check out for me. And we discovered it because I, the symptoms exacerbated to an extent that I was like, my nervous system was in crisis.
Mm.
And
Oh, boy.
one of the ways in which that checks out is when I look at the last 4 years of my life, where I moved to Lake Tahoe for COVID, and then
Right.
I moved into a camper and did
Yeah.
camper life on the road with no plan, just wandering around. I had intended to come and see you in Ojai, actually,
Yeah. Right.
but then I got mad at California and just drove to Washington one day. I just had to get as far away
That's
from
funny.
California as I could for reasons. Um, I moved to Colorado for 9 months, where I think we might have had a podcast episode,
Yeah. Yeah, I
but
think
I
that's
moved
it.
to this little town called Frisco. So beautiful, population 1,500. It's at 9,000 feet, just like
Mm.
so dreamy, surrounded by mountains,
Mm.
snowier than what you got going in Ojai, but and had elevation fatigue the whole time. Like,
Oh, it's funny. You just said that, and I was in Taos this past summer, and I got, yeah, I had to actually, for anybody who goes to these elevated places and you have trouble,
yeah.
chlorophyll, take
Huh.
it, a lot of it every day. Ralph, that was the only way I got through.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Chlorophyll having oxygen in it,
yeah,
high
yeah,
in
yeah,
oxygen.
yeah,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Where were you when I needed you in Colorado with that tip?
yeah.
But that only lasted 9 months because I was on the floor the whole time, just totally wiped out, going,
Really?
what's going on with me? Ended
Oh,
up in Seattle, signed this book deal to do the Outshining trauma book that we're here to talk about.
yeah, we haven't even mentioned it. I was just going to say that. Yeah. Yeah. This
uh,
is, yeah, we're going to talk
yeah.
about it in a minute.
But a very scattered journey, very, very scattered journey. And that book was very, very difficult to write, and I didn't know why the whole time. I was like, "Why isn't this one just flowing out of me like the other two did? Why is this is just really having
Mm.
a hard time organizing myself, having a hard time with everything about it." And then I ran the gauntlet. Raghu, I got to the end of it,
Yeah.
and we were in the final editing phase, and 3 days before my final deadline, which I wasn't gonna make because my brain was a mess and I didn't know why, and then 3 days before final deadline, my liver failed.
Oh my God.
I woke up yellow,
He-
and instead of
Hepatitis.
go what's that?
Hepatitis or
It's,
jaundice.
a medically induced liver infection, or, um, I
Jesus
forget what the
Christ.
technical word. I took an antibiotic uh, that nearly
Pers-
exploded my liver. It
that
they
precipitated this, an antibiotic.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Holy
yeah.
shit.
My liver almost exploded. It almost
Whoa.
burst. I
That
had the
would,
highest, what they call AST score, liver enzyme score, that the doctors had ever seen. I think 1600 is considered a very bad score. Mine was 24 million.
oh, fuck.
And so, yeah, so I had a, casual brush with death at the same time as, I'm finishing this book, which then had to be finished during a very difficult recovery period. And it's just, I mean, you're somebody who gets the cosmic joke. You're somebody who understands that the universe so often traffics in cruel ironies. It's the dance, the Leela of things
Yeah.
that when we look back we can laugh, but like at the time it was miserable. But to be a trauma therapist, writing a book about how we outshine trauma, how we can overcome trauma, and then to have a truly traumatic event
Yeah.
unfold and have to actually, put my money where my mouth was, basically, between the
Yeah.
time the book was finished and how you see me now, is
No,
really
my.
just like an uncanny, poetic, if it wasn't so terrible, sort of thing.
Wow.
But I'm grateful to be alive and to be here talking to you and with this
Yeah.
medicine for the world
Yeah.
as well. So,
Oh, that's so
yeah, how's that for
incredible.
a quick
You,
catch up?
you know what it reminds? So before we got on, I told you about we're doing a course which Ralph is
Mm,
involved with, although he didn't know it, but he is. It's called Centered in the Storm, Finding Your Inner Refuge.
mm,
And it has a lot of extraordinary teachers, people that Ralph and I both know or, are very meaningful to us, and from Jack Cornfield to Sharon Salzberg and on and on. Robert Thurman, I mean, Roshi Halifax. It's amazing. Anyhow,
And then this guy,
and
what?
then and Ralph. Uh,
Um,
so
wow.
our person, Jackie Dobrinska, who leads up the educational and diversity and fellowship of Ramdas,
Yeah,
important
she's great.
person, she thought of this beautiful name, Centered in the Storm.
Yeah,
Before the election, we wanted to give everybody, including ourselves, as much support as possible to stay as balanced as possible. Good name.
yeah, yeah.
She's in Asheville, North Carolina. She lives there.
Wow.
And in the middle of it, so she Centered in the Storm didn't say, I don't know if it is,
Again,
I mean, today even I'm hearing just extraordinary stories. Extraordinary.
unbelievable.
And it just, so it's ongoing. I mean, this is a month later, I guess, almost. And so she's sitting there and saying to herself, Centered in the Storm, maybe I ought to name it something else. This is too weird. I'm centered in the storm. And, and I went ahead and named it like this. Of course, that happened before anything happened. But yeah, the irony that happens to us that we can look at in our lives. I mean, what happened to you, what happened to her is extraordinary. And you know what I think it does, though? It gives us enough
Mm,
space to sort of, where, as you mentioned before, you can smile a little bit. Wow, that was incredible. You know, especially if you come out on the right
Yeah.
end of it in terms of still having a body.
That is definitely true. The story has to have a particular outcome, like,
Well, we wouldn't
living to
have a
see another
podcast
day.
if
And
that.
yeah,
So,
exactly,
and
exactly.
Jackie
But
wouldn't be
wow,
running a course.
talk about events that would be poetic
Mm,
if they weren't so terrible, to name a
yeah,
course that and then to have that happen. I mean, and I believe you with the ongoing recovery out there.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, just
Oh boy. By the
unreal.
way, I mean, this occurs to me. The people that we are trying to, the people are asking because they know, we have people there that are part of the foundation. Actually,
Mhm.
the store is the warehouse, where all the books are and all the things.
Oh wow.
Um, so yeah, it was very, very
Whoa,
impactful in
whoa.
that way. Um, but can you tell me? I mean, it would have made sense if you had gone through this medical event,
Mhm.
and then you came out of it and you thought, okay, this is some real trauma here. I'm gonna, get into this and share this with
Yeah.
people. But you had prepared this way before that happened. I mean, you had the idea. Tell me about how that all took place.
Yeah. I mean, it would have been kind of uncanny if that had happened and then I had included it in the book, but to have it afterwards was, yeah, yeah, something else. But so tell you how the book came about,
Yeah, yeah. What
or
were you thinking
how I
about
worked through
when?
this.
Yeah, I mean, I know that
Mm.
this has been primary in the work that you do and so on,
Mhm.
but it has a particular um, purview, which
Sure.
I found interesting, which is using science
Mhm.
and using a methodology that, by the way, you're going to explain because I only know of it. I have never, the family system, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And and then just marrying it to the mostly in this case Buddhist
Yep.
um, perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did that all kind of get formed with?
Well, when it's the combination of methodologies that I've been saying, kind of took me from the third base of healing my life all the way to home plate.
Mm,
Um, just being a trauma survivor, having a lot of troubles growing up, experiencing a lot of violence growing up, experiencing heroin addiction, polysubstance addiction, really. Anything I
mm,
could get my hands
mm,
on in my 20s was going in this body. And then surviving that, spending my 30s studying and going to school and getting a master's degree and all of these things and putting together my life and doing therapy and self-healing work all that time, and then finding myself as a psychotherapist in private practice who still had a lot of rage, still had some things that were half healed and some things that I was still very brokenhearted about, and really in the belief that that some things can't be healed, or some things are meant to just remain a mystery.
mm,
I guess, like, this is just how I'm going to go around the rest of my life. It's better than how it was before, so I'm grateful for that. And then this modality of internal family systems comes along and mixes so seamlessly with my Buddhist. At the time, I was deep in Tibetan Buddhist. I have a foot in the Bhakti yoga world as well,
yeah.
but it just mixed so seamlessly and gave me a whole new methodology that was right in alignment with that bodhisattva who I see sitting over your shoulder there. Smart place to have a bodhisattva, by the way, right on your shoulder.
Mm,
Um, because it's so compassion based and so about how we heal our afflictions, our kleshas, our samskaras, so that we can uncover the divine spark within us, uncover the open-hearted, awakened state. And so that's been the focus of my work ever since. And this is my third book, bringing together these, inner technologies of deep mindfulness-based, compassion-based Buddhist practice and this internal family system model of psychotherapy that one can practice on oneself without a therapist present.
Oh,
But this time, I really wanted to just make as pure as possible, like a guidebook for walking a healing path, using meditation and these tools to work with oneself and all the complex difficulties that arise as one walks such a path. So it's,
yeah. The subtitle's A New Vision of Radical Self-Compassion. And of course, we'll talk about self-compassion, which
sure.
is
It has to be radical, though, by the way. It can't just be regular self-compassion, radical
course,
only. Yes.
But can you, I think internal family systems, I'm probably not alone, not knowing, what exactly it is. I get it through you of how you might use it in terms of the work that you do. But I'm especially interested to say, when you say that this is not you don't need to go into somebody's office for this. But
Indeed.
yeah, give us a little bit of a, because there is no doubt in my mind that everybody can take advantage of some kind of therapeutic application involving psychology. And Ram Dass was famous, and that's what he was really good at, which is why his translation of what he experienced in India was so profound and direct for people. Yeah. So, but there's a lot of issues, as Ram Dass used to get asked all the time, hey, should I do therapy? Because I got all this psychological bullshit going on. And he's, oh, absolutely, he would say, as long as the therapist doesn't think they're a therapist. Only. In other words, as long as that identification isn't so strong that it creates a separation and so on. So, internal family system, what is it?
So, I'm with you in, there's a Buddhist text that says, that I talk about in the book that says, our methods of liberation have no power on their own. That it's your heart, it's your application that brings the juice. It's a vehicle, but you are the fuel. Without you, the vehicle, no power. So I'm with Ram Dass in that way for sure. But internal family systems really aligns with the Buddhist view of no self or anatman, in that, what we are, who we are inside, there's a multiplicitous, vast and complex, fluid, ever-changing nature to who we are. And just like, you might have noticed, you can always find a parallel between the mind and the body in the way that things work. And just like the body is comprised of parts, and they're discrete parts, my hands are a discrete part, right? But to point to my hand and say, this is the body, makes sense. IFS posits, well, that's true for the psyche as well. The psyche has moving parts to it that are both discrete and in concert with each other, right? So in Zen, they say not one, not two, right? In Bhakti Yoga, I learned the mantra Achinta Beta Beta Tattva, that the inconceivable plurality and oneness of everything.
I never heard that. Can you say it again slower?
Oh,
I want to get it.
The Vaishnavas love it. Achinta Beta Abeta Tattva.
Achintya Beta Beta Tattva.
Yeah, Achintya Beta Abeta Tattva.
Abeta Tattva.
Yeah. Beta, same. Abeta, not the same.
Tattva truth.
Achinta, inconceivable tattva truth. So the truth of simultaneous oneness and diversity, right? And that it's inconceivable.
Can you listen? Ralph, this is crazy, but could you email me that and with the
Yeah.
translation, because we're
Yeah.
going to get this up in the show notes. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful mantra. And I never heard it. I spent all that time in India. I had waited for this moment for you to tell me.
Yeah. The Vaishnavas are big on it, and they take it as the way in which we are one with God, but then also part and parcel of God. So a little bit of a different spin. I'm taking it and putting seeing it as a message as how we work inside internally, that we have different parts of our psyche that hold different things for us. Like right now I'm talking to you, and the heart's a little bit open, but there's a part of my psyche that's holding it together, making sure I put on the right clothes and put on the right face for this interview, right? And we all have those parts that help us function, get through the day, help us remember the things that we got to remember to prevent us from looking like an ass or something else in the realm of vulnerability, right? And then, we have the parts of us that hold the vulnerable stuff, the wounds, the shame, the things we're afraid of, the deeply held secrets, the core memories that haven't been worked out yet. We have those parts too, but those are the parts we try to keep at bay, right? So we hold those parts down most of the time because we would not be able to function if they were at the surface all the time. And then we have a whole other category of parts that pop out when those vulnerabilities are triggered. And we get reactive, the rage, the self-medication, the dissociation, whatever it is, reaching for Netflix, for a sex partner, whatever your thing is, right? We all have moments where suddenly the house is out of order and we've got to reestablish safety for ourselves. And so we have those parts of our psyche too. But then we have the capital S self inside, the heart of compassion, which isn't a solid, fixed self. It's dynamic, it's fluid. It has many different faces, just like Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva with 1,000 arms in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism. Right, the open-hearted state has 1,000 arms, has 1,000 different expressions to it, and so IFS says, healing isn't a matter so much of how we fix ourselves or how we, work out our problems in some goal-oriented manner. It's actually a matter of how we get to know and befriend all of these different parts of our psyche from that heart of compassion. Can we connect the heart of compassion to our suffering, basically? And when we do that, what we find with great consistency is the parts of us that are holding those afflictions, holding the deep conditioning and miseducations and all the things we've been through, they start to shift their presentation a bit, right? When we can get into what IFS calls self-energy, right?
Yeah, that's
the
a good
heart of
thing to explain
compassion,
too.
and connected to perhaps what we would call a firefighter part that explodes with rage when we're made to feel ashamed or insulted in some way. If we can connect compassion to rage, right, that's an alchemical formula right there. That rageful part of us, we can then communicate within our own nervous systems, and there's a whole wealth of techniques to how we do this in IFS that really check out, really kind of amaze me on a daily basis in terms of what I discover within myself and what I get to witness my therapy clients and my meditation students as well discovering. So yeah, so internal family systems, right? We can take that as to connote something about ourselves, that inside we have a family with members, right? We have a family
Oh,
inside
that's
where
cool. Is it
every
really?
part of us wants what
Yeah.
everybody else wants
Yeah.
in a family, to feel loved,
And be
to
happy.
not be betrayed, to be heard. And so, the question is, are we listening to what's happening inside? Right?
Well, that strikes me as there is the probably beauty, I would say, of combining this internal family systems with Buddhist practice, particularly meditation, which is, which you're doing as well, and helping
Mhm.
people that way. But yeah, the practice. I mean, to get self-compassion and
Mm.
and get friendly with all of the terrible dark shit that runs through us on a day-to-day basis,
Mhm.
that uh, it it's definitely a lot of work. Okay, I mean, not to make too big a
Right.
thing out of it, but the practice part of it.
Mhm.
I mean, I find, people may have difficulty with, say, meditation. How many people have told you, I would bet, you know, can't really do meditation because my mind is wandering all the time. I'm not meditating.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. That's good. That's your starting point, but
Mhm.
people have a hard time, and they have some other assumption about what meditation is.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been reflecting on this a lot, that the mindfulness zeitgeist of the 2010s was so wonderful, and yet so many people met with what I'll just say are incomplete instructions, or in meditation instructions without the view, without the worldview
Yeah.
that is designed to go with it. That a lot of people tried it and it stuck for so few of them, and many people did walk away with that narrative of, my mind's too wild.
Yeah, I can't do it. It's not
To
me. It's not
yeah.
for me. I knew meditation wasn't for me. It's um,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
but
yeah.
Ralph, can you talk about, because you did say, internal family systems has some techniques
Yeah.
related to how you cultivate the kind of compassion. It's actually, without the self-compassion, it's very difficult to have compassion for those around us.
Certainly.
But yeah, what are some of those advisals that?
Right. So it looks one way in a facilitated like therapy session. It looks another way when we incorporate it into a meditation practice. But, in a meditation practice, first I would really ground us in the body, get us connected
Mm-hmm.
to the breath. Certain breath techniques, like setting the breath in its natural rhythm, really slow down the mind, open up space in the mind. And then once we have that space, we can use it for good things. And, in a therapy session, what I would do is I would wait till somebody comes up with an affliction, something that's giving them whatever it is, stress, pain.
Mm-hmm.
I would have them find it in the body first. And then I would have them, there's some many different ways to do this, but create space between them and that part holding the affliction, what Ram Dass would call finding the compassionate witness, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then once there's that space, though, all important question is to ask inside, well, how do I feel towards this part of me right now? And what you'll get first, invariably, is the other parts of you that hate this part because they're causing a mess, or their rage is, or their alcoholism is making our life unmanageable, or whatever it is. You'll find self-judging parts. And Raghu, this sounds bananas. This is meant to be experienced before it's talked about, but
Uh,
because this sounds cuckoo. But we have this technique where we notice the reactive part inside, and we ask that inside silently, hey, could you just step to the side? And if you ask in the right way, you will feel the self judgment very subtly, intuitively kind of step into the side. And then I'll ask somebody a second time, how do you feel towards the part now? And once again, we'll get another reactive part like, I don't really want to be doing this. This is boring. Whatever the reaction is. We'll ask
woohoo!
that
It's
part
too
to step
woohoo.
aside too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it usually takes 2 times. This happens with astonishing predictability.
Hmm.
2 times, and then I'll ask, "Well, how do you feel towards this part of you now? Can you find a space inside that feels a little bit clear and open to befriending this part?" And most times, more times than not, at least, people will say, "Yeah, I can find that space. I can lean in with this suffering part of me now." And it's through that leaning in that might first show up as calm, might show up as curiosity or just a genuine presence or openness. But once we behold and genuinely perceive that there's parts of us that are in hell inside. You talked about the dark shit that we go through every day. Those are parts of your mind that live in a hell realm. Our hearts can really break open for our own struggle in that way. And
Right.
that to me is the nature of what I would call radical self-compassion. When you start to behold your own struggle and are willing to get intimate with your afflictions rather than run from them. In Buddhist practice, a very advanced practice called Mahamudra, wherein a person would become very intimate with their afflictions. Why? To pierce the veil of illusion and to see through to their true nature, that everything is spacious and everything is compassion. So IFS
Yeah.
is very similar to that
Mm.
very advanced practice. We want to
You-
become intimate so that we can break through and transcend.
I don't know when I just had thought of, you just triggered something. Not a good thing,
I
a
do
really
that for
good
a
thing.
living, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah. No, but this is a good thing.
Yeah.
When you said Mahamudra, that
Mahamudra.
famous, incredible Buddhist prayer, whatever.
Yeah.
I was sitting with Krishnadas actually in front of Neem Karoli Baba one day, and he was looking through Krishnadas's diary. There was a whole other thing going on, which is another story, which I have told probably a million times on the podcast. It was so profound. But this particular thing really speaks to something that I think is important. So Krishnadas had put a passage from Mahamudra. He wrote it in his diary, and Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba, said to the translator, translate this for me. And he read it, and Maharaji went, teak, right on, right? And then the next page, this is the funny part, Krishnadas had put a big picture of Maharaji in his diary. And he said, who's that? And then we went, yeah, you're right. Who's that? Are you kidding? And he went, Buddha. That was some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but it was a kernel had been, a coal had been lit inside us.
Yeah.
We had been doing Vipassana meditation and so on and so forth. And I bring this up, so it's very much we are not in any way, our legacy is not Bhakti Yoga only. Our legacy is this combination with Buddha's discriminating wisdom, for sure. Yeah. And we have them at the retreats. All of our guys. Ram Dass's close friends from Jack on, and but just I thought of it when you said Mahamudra, but the way in which you are bringing this system, which I only knew about, but I didn't know the intricacies whatsoever, the way you're bringing it in and the way it's fitting with Buddhist perspective is really, to me, it's a powerful thing because it allows everybody to, recognize all the different parts, as you were speaking to before, that, you're relating with on a moment-to-moment basis. And then having a way to speak to them. And it might be just what you said. Hey, can you move aside for a minute here? It's okay. But then it brings up Ram Dass's powerful meditation. I am loving awareness, the loving awareness meditation. And without that, we have no chance at self-compassion in mind, because if we're doing it from the story we tell ourselves place, mini me, we call it, then it's going to continue. It might get more subtle in terms of the kind of judgments and deprecating language that we use on ourselves. Right. But I think, if you move into that's where the heart thing to me is absolutely a, it's so important in all of this because we can enter in a place where that compassion can really take place, I think.
Yeah. And so given that, joy is transformative too,
Mm.
of course, that's maybe more of the
Mm.
bhakti side, but given that we suffer, why not use that as a springboard into compassion? Why not learn and train to let it signal to you, it's time to open my heart? And yes, it starts with the family we hold inside. We start with self-compassion, but do that long enough and the compassion starts to overflow and you get to know your own mind and you will see how everybody else's mind works too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll quick story. I was
Yeah.
in a training with Jack Hornfield at Spirit Rock right before the pandemic, and he was teaching us. He was, for the first time, he was training meditation teachers in meditation techniques he had developed that were informed by his experiences with shamans in South America. So more very visual, very colorful, very
Mm.
fantastical,
Mm.
and powerful meditation techniques that were really like mini sober journeys. And it looked a lot like this parts work thing in internal family systems. There was a lot of parallels. And during a lunch break, I go up to him, like, just, practically frothing at the mouth. Have you heard of internal family systems? And Jack just holds up his hand, like, calm down, kid.
Mhm.
And he says, Ralph, if you stick around long enough, you really will learn the architecture of the psyche. Right.
Ah.
So there
Wow.
is an architecture to who we
Mhm.
are inside, and there's so many different maps of what that is. None of them are the terrain. But I think IFS is one of the most useful maps I've ever
Mm.
run into, and I will
Mm.
stop proselytizing now. But
Yeah. That's great.
yeah.
Uh, let's. I want us to talk about. There's one chapter in the book.
Mhm.
It's called Refuge, and as soon as I saw that and read a little bit, oh God, you put this Billie Holiday quote in there. I got to read that. Who puts a Billie Holiday lyric in a spiritual book? You do. Gotta have something to eat and gotta have a little love in your life before you can hold still for anyone's damn sermon on how to behave. Fantastic. Actually, we would, this is something we knew Maharaji would say all the time. You feed people before you even do any kind of prayers or rituals or anything. Don't do that. Feed people.
Yeah.
And before we would all, get together and he'd have a chanting and stuff. But never would it happen before food. Of course, we were so stuffed, we probably could barely walk over to where we were going to do that. But yeah, refuge and home. I mean, that was my first, when I first met Maharaji in that moment.
Yeah.
And you can ask any of people who had met him, and they would say the same thing. Yeah, finally home. I
Mhm.
felt at home. And that's what,
Yeah.
this is what you're speaking to here. Protection beyond defense mechanisms. Talk about that. I think it's real important.
Kind of an audacious notion, right? That dropping our armor to
Yeah.
take refuge in the breath, in the body, in the truth, in the heart of compassion. All of that asks us to drop our armor rather than to, gird our loins.
Steel ourselves.
And somehow that's actually one of the deepest forms of safety we can, at least emotional safety that we can discover in our lives, is actually to get naked. But before you do that, because that's daunting and there's all kinds of parts of our psyche that are going to say, excuse me, that
Mhm.
makes no sense. I got a job and taxes to pay, and
Yeah.
it's a dangerous world.
Yeah.
Get naked, no thanks. So yeah, you got to create an atmosphere where people feel safe to do the work to discover that on their own. And so refuge has, this concept of refuge has a lot of layers to it. Like, I love the term holding environment, which comes from Donald Winnicott, a psychoanalyst in the mid 20th century, referring to the space that you create in a therapy session, or the space between two friends, or the space between you and Maharaji and Krishna Das and these beautiful folks, right? A space that feels like you're being held in it, like there's love present.
Yeah.
And then that makes it okay for the difficulties to come up, for us to be challenged. And I mean, I know Maharaji was very much of that kind of traditional guru model of being a hard ass as well. So
Irrational is probably more correct.
I've been through some chastisements myself, so it takes a lot to withstand it. But if you don't feel safe as a precursor, you'll never be able to do that work, right?
No,
So
it wouldn't even open. That door wouldn't even be open for some.
Yeah. Feed people. That's a great place to start.
Yeah. So wow.
But I think compassion as a refuge, the energy of compassion as a refuge, that can save us, honestly, from getting tangled up in so many different webs of reactivity and conditioning and what have you. Really is a good idea, really is a healthy choice, to lead with compassion rather than our masks.
I like it, but again, I always feel an emphasis that this doesn't just magically appear. Any of this, self-love, self-compassion, finding home. It takes well, first of all, start with a good perspective.
Sure.
Which in the case of in my own case, I got that from Ram Dass right away when I first met him, and then it developed over the years. But it doesn't develop again without an initiative on one's part.
Yeah. Which is often the suffering, right?
Yeah, right. That's often the suffering. But you have one part of this in terms of when you talked about refuge. You have something called refuge and security in the breath. And I can't more highly recommend. That's a great starting place for people. I mean, whether it's pranayam or whether it's just, there's a great book by I can't remember the name of it. I should find it for the show notes. But somebody who wrote a beautiful book about all the different ways that we breathe. And he suggested that, first of all, do it through your nose and take very purposeful, like do 5 minutes. And it's, I think the key is about 5 seconds breathing in and breathing out, and do that for about 5 minutes. So it's conscious breathing, not like Vipassana meditation, which you're just following whatever the normal course of your breath is. But that is such a simple way to start, huh? Wouldn't you say? I mean, I think of all things, that is the simplest and most direct and makes things happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about that last piece, especially. That makes things happen. So the breath, I posit pseudoscientifically, I posit that the breath has more to it than we think it does. And let's just sidebar for a moment and think about what healthy love feels like a healthy, committed relationship might feel like, what we would call secure attachment in the psychological jargon, right? There's a smoothness, there's an ease, there's not a lot of drama. If there's a difficulty, we work it out. We exert a good influence on each other, right? That would be healthy love. Well, the breath has this steadiness, this availability to it, this reliability. It's trustworthy. It
goes wherever you go,
influence. It goes wherever you go, always there for you. You can be distracted for a million years, and the breath is right there waiting for you to notice it.
Yeah.
It's pushing nutrients to your cells. It's regulating your nervous system. There's so much to the breath. And so when I say refuge in the breath, I mean, we can have a love affair with the breath. That's my first Buddhist teacher, Vinnie Ferraro, says it's a love affair with the breath. In other words, paying attention to the breath is one thing, but imagine for a moment you actually cared for the breath, or you held it with your attention, just like you would a lover, not too tight, not too loose, right? And entering into like a dance, a loving dance. The breath is loving you, you're loving it back. To me, that's taking mindfulness to a paradigm where, dear God, if we had that in the 2010s, I think it would have stuck a little bit more for folks rather than pay attention at the tip of your nose. Like, okay, you know,
or
it's a great start,
mindfulness,
but
which is more like, how judgmental can I get about everything? That's my mindfulness.
I mean, that's what ends up happening, right?
Yeah.
That's not,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, a lot of time because we have a predilection for going down that road because it's what we've been used to it. And those habitual patterns are seemingly more comfortable than change.
Right, which that's the mirror of mindfulness that freaked everyone out. Still freaks me out to this day, 20 years in. It's like you
Well-
got to look in the mirror before you can do any work. You got to see what you're working with.
Yeah.
And so people catch their own anxiety, their own distractedness, whatever it is, their own patterns. You know, they catch that reflection in mindfulness and then they walk away with the narrative of, this isn't for me. That increased my anxiety. It increased my self-judgment. And if there's nobody there to say, no, that was your reflection, baby. That was one voice in the conversation. How do you want to respond to that self-judgment? What place do you want to come from when it comes to your own distractedness or your own wounding or whatever it is? You know?
Yeah. I think another thing, you know, we're running out of time, but I did want to really bring that. I think this is some of the most important, one of the most important parts of everything we're discussing and what's in this book and what's natural for us, which is to find out who we really are and be and have some courage about that finding out. You know, courage is another whole thing. But this thing is called you are never alone. And I think that's probably the most important thing is for us to be able to get with a community, a sangha, a satsang. Could be, you know, what did Christ say? 2 or more gathered in my name, there I am.
Right.
Can be that. And in that sense, the way, and we spend honest time together. That's why these retreats that we've been doing for many, many years while Ram Dass was alive, and we continue to do them, a couple a year. The beauty of everybody dropping that identity at the door that you came in with. And then suddenly you get a little of that, what we talked before about refuge, about home. I started feeling, okay, I can breathe a little bit here. And then you start doing some practices that, you know, starting in the early morning and meditative and body work and all of that. And then something happens where you are not chastising, shall I say, yourself the way that we normally do on a day-to-day basis. And something shifts. And we hope people walk away with that shift. And I'm sure in this absolutely no less effect of your working with people, that they walk away with enough of a shift to be able to go, it's all okay. I don't have to beat myself to death. I have some practices. I can use my breath. You know, I can start 2 minutes of meditating or a chant or whatever it may be. There's so many different ways. Right?
Perspective.
Yeah.
perspective, right? We're so zoomed in on our afflictions and the daily agonies, right? Trauma and any sort of stress response is really of the nature of narrowing, of
Mm.
tightening, contracting. But the heart expands, and healing makes us spacious, and spiritual practice helps us to expand to be spacious too. Right. So we zoom out. That's what I heard in that narrative is folks start to zoom out a bit and get a little bit more of a bird's eye view of what's going on. And now I
Mm.
have some other inclinations than I
Yeah.
did before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 It's actually, it's funny because it's really not that large a step to have that shift go on,
Hmm.
you know? I mean, many people, of course, we haven't talked about it, and I don't know if we've talked much about it previously, about psychedelics. The big psychedelic revolution is on now. And actually, I talked to somebody. I did a podcast yesterday with a psychiatrist. I must be
Hmm.
needing a little bit of psychiatric help here. I have 2 in a row. I'll admit it.
For that, you
Anyhow,
pay extra.
he's very much involved with integration, as
Mm.
you are,
Yeah.
on a different
Yeah.
level. Different methodology. But the ineffable experience, of course, that
Mhm.
happens with entheogens. And then what do you do to integrate that? I mean,
Right.
taking it every weekend maybe isn't quite the right thing, but maybe it is for you. Who knows?
Mm.
But I always, advise people, and we're setting out now. We've started. We have something called the Explorers Club at ramdas.org. And that's, people come in and speak to psychedelics, integration, spirituality, science, psychedelic insight, and then people get together and talk amongst themselves about it, which is
Nice.
again, what we were talking about. Well, you are not alone.
Mhm.
We do a lot of that because we feel that is super, super important.
Mhm.
But it it may be a bit of a. I mean, listen, when we're talking about in terms of my own involvement, it's Ram Dass, okay? So one of the OGs of the psychedelic era. But later he was all about integration and
Right.
using methodology and he used so many different traditions and practices, from Buddhism to Hinduism, Tibetan Buddhism, and he was very much someone who integration of using the methodology that you've been speaking to with
Mhm.
internal family systems
Mhm.
and integrating it with your Buddhist practices and so on, and just integrating it with perspective,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's I think there is a way to make that, as I just said, that shift, so that we are not constantly involved with believing our thoughts, believing the story,
Mm.
and so on. I don't know if I told you. I mean, I've been telling everybody every week about we did an audio book, Duncan Trussell and I,
Mm.
another podcast close friend, and
Yeah.
it was the movie of me to the movie of we. And we used ourselves as subject matter
Mm.
for all of the habitual patterns and neurotic tendencies and everybody. Yeah, we've all got it. And a lot of
Yep.
it boils down to the same stuff. I once spent time with Ram Dass in India, and a bunch of people, including Krishna Das. Bunch, it was only like 6 or 7 of us. And he would regale us with his exploits in the
Mm.
psychedelic realm and beyond. And I it just to it just gave so much fodder to the possibility of overcoming, and that's not a good word, but transforming fear.
Sure.
Which is such a major, this is what we walk around. This is the primary Kalaisha, probably, right? And the most disturbing. So maybe we can close here just a little bit about fear and how you've dealt with it. Well, your own, so you've gone through so much yourself, Ralph.
You know, I'm about to mention somebody that I've deemed to be pretty problematic, but that I also learned a lot from, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who, yeah, a very loaded name, but
No, I don't care what anybody says. This is one of the most incredible teachers that I ever had. Absolutely.
Who said, we place the heart of fearfulness in the cradle of loving kindness. And that's a meditation instruction. You know? That's a meditation instruction. I'll tell you my favorite way.
Say it again. Please, I got to hear it again.
Place the heart of fearfulness in the cradle of loving kindness.
Wow.
Isn't that nice? It just makes sense. That's the formula of how we heal.
Yeah.
You know, put the afflictions in the space of compassion and things will move. And I'll tell you my favorite way lately of teaching this and doing this for myself, creating that atmosphere, is just a visualization. And folks listening could actually do this very briefly with me now. A visualization that one is walking to their favorite spot in nature and seeing the sights and hearing the sounds that are there and, you know, feeling the air on your skin. And then sitting down in that place and kind of having a moment of acknowledging the earth is not a dead rock. It's providing all the oxygen I breathe. It's providing, you know, all the food that becomes the cells in my body, you know, the clothes I'm wearing, the raw materials of my home. It's all earth stuff. The earth's given that to me. The earth is a lover, actually. There's an energy to the earth. We naturally heal in the natural environment. And seeing that, we can imagine we place a hand on the ground, just like the Buddha in his moment of trial with Mara, the demon god. Place a hand on the ground and begin inviting that earth energy with the breath into the body. Invite that love of the earth, and we go through and we scan through the entire body, just inviting the earth energy in, inviting it in and in. And what happens within space of 5 minutes, you know, once you go from head all the way down to toes, is there is that shift. And people feel with great consistency like, okay, now I'm in that holding environment. Now I'm having that zoomed out perspective where now I can allow the fear, the anguish, whatever it is, to arise in this container, right? We've created the cradle of loving kindness by connecting to the earth. Now it's time to put the fear in it. And that's a good idea. That's a non-re-traumatizing idea, a non-re-traumatizing way, a healing way to relate to difficulty, which is not unlike Maharaji saying, feed people first, right? Create the atmosphere first, and then the self-work can unfold with coherency. Oh, yeah.
Beautiful, Ralph. I love that.
Yeah,
that's a great practice. Everybody, I think we'll transcribe it and put it up somewhere, whatever, so people have access to it. Yeah, that's wonderful. I thank you so much for being here, Ralph. This has been, as usual, always is.
Yeah.
A great
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Always a good chat.
Yeah.
Always a good chat. And I love the Maharaji stories so much. I mean, we could just have a podcast of you telling those stories and I would just sit here and listen the whole time.
There is a book, by the way, of us telling those stories called Love Everyone. I don't know if you know it.
I know about Miracle of Love. I read that in the 90s,
that's mostly Indian people's experiences. And here's some judgmental mind stuff. That book has Ram Dass's stories, of course, and a couple other Westerners, but mostly it's Indian people that Ram Dass went around with other people and got their stories. And they liked to sanitize Neem Karoli Baba because he used foul language or
Artistic.
irrational responses, or they just, so they sanitize it. But the Westerners that went over there, and a book was created a number of years ago called Love Everyone. You can get it in Ram Dass shop, ramdass.org/shop. It has all of our journeys, many of the people that you've heard about, including Krishnadas, and all of our journeys, meeting Ram Dass, then getting over to India, what happened there with Neem Karoli Baba, and then coming back and so on. It's, while we were there, most of us at the end of the day wrote down what he said to us or to the group. So it's much more accurate than Miracle of Love.
Very nice. Very nice. If
God
I may,
help me. God help me.
if I may help you plug the book, I'll just
Yeah.
say that these stories are some of the most important teachings we could ever absorb. When we hear, how other people have walked the path, I really believe that modeling is the deepest form of teaching. How when we witness other people walking and dealing with the complexities, and we start to place ourselves in their shoes. And so how great that y'all made that book, because I'm sure it's having an impact for folks.
Speaking of books, do you have your book by you?
I sure do.
Can you show it?
Yeah. Outshining
yeah.
Dharma. There it is. Yes.
So
this is
everybody,
November 26th.
When is it coming out?
November 26th.
Oh,
on all formats.
Okay, so this is, I'm sure this will come out. I'm not positive, but I think it'll come out before the book does. So you can pre-order it. I know that because we do that all the time. So we'll give you the link. So Ralph will send a link for that to me, and I'll give it to the people who do the show notes, and then, also to his website if you want to work with him. Do you work remotely or just in person?
All remote right now.
It's all remote.
I will be on a book tour in January with a whole bunch of East Coast, West Coast dates as well. So, yeah.
Well, you're probably going to be near here, so you have to come by. Okay.
You're holding me to it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, again, thanks, Ralph. This has been great, as it always is. And I hope everybody who's listening there's a bunch of stuff here to certainly take advantage of in terms of, especially with what's going on, high anxiety now with an election and all that. So to that,
may we find the center of love and stand in our power through it, because holy moly, it ain't going to be over for a while.
No, it's not. So I bless this mess. That's good. That works for me.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, indeed.
And again, thank you. And everybody go to BeHereNowNetwork.com/mindrolling, and you'll get all the show notes and links for Ralph's book, etc. And I'll just go to BeHereNowNetwork.com because all of our favorite people are there, from Jack Kornfield to Krishnamurti's there now too. Podcasts.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
What you rose him from the beyond? You got him back?
Yes, we know how to do that. Yeah, we got him back. And him and Alan Watts,
All right, that's our next interview. You're unpacking that technique.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Ralph.
Yeah.
We'll see everybody next time.